Greetings everyone, my name is Mielani Vimba. On today's lesson we're going to look at the structure and the function of cells. So basically we're going to look at the animal cell and the plant cell structures and their functions. After that we're going to look at the differences between these two cells, right? Okay, so here with me I have the animal cell structure. Firstly, let's look at the shape of the animal cell. The animal cell have the irregular shape. You can't say this is a rectangle or it's a square or even a circle. No, the animal cell have irregular shape, right? Okay, let's move on to the flexible structure that surrounds the cell. We call this structure the cell membrane. It is labeled I here. The cell membrane holds the cell together. It gives the cell its shape. It also controls which substances enters into and out of the cell. How does it do that? This structure is a permeable membrane, meaning that it has pores onto it, which makes it possible to control which liquid substances, which gaseous substances enters into and out of the cell, right? Okay, so let's move on to our structure labeled M. Our M structure here, we call it the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is the whitish part here, all the whitish part here. We call it the cytoplasm. It is a jelly-like liquid that is found within the cell. It contains all the organelles. So organelles are the small structures that are found within the cell. These are organelles. The B structure, D structure, E structures, all these up until L. We call them the organelles. They are found within the cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm also gives the cell its turgidity, its firmness, right? Its toughness. Okay? Yes. Okay, let's move on to structure labeled A. Our A structure here, we call it the vacuole. This is where the transport of substances into and out of the cells occur, right? Okay, let's move on to our structure labeled B. We call this structure the mitochondrion. This is also called the powerhouse. Why? Because it provides the cell with the energy by breaking down the glucose molecules through respiration. It provides energy. Remember, without energy, you can't do anything. Hence, it is called the powerhouse. The cell needs energy in order to function. The energy comes from this, the mitochondrion, the powerhouse, right? Okay, let's move on to our D structure. We call it the centrosome. The centrosome is involved in cell division, right? Okay, let's move on to our E structure. We call it the nucleus. The nucleus controls everything that the cell does, right? It contains the genetic information that allows the cell to function, right? This genetic information, they are also passed on into the offspring from the mother, right? Okay, so we have these structures here. The whitish part, we call them the DNA, our genetic information, right? Inside the nucleus, right? Okay, let's move on to our structure about F. We call this the rough endoplasmic reticulum. We call them rough endoplasmic reticulum because they are surrounded by the ribosomes, which makes them to look rough, right? But then they have the same function with the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. These ones are smooth because they are not surrounded by the ribosome, right? But these two structures, the rough endoplasmic reticulum and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, they have the same function. It is the site where the cell makes most of its membrane, right? Okay, let's move on to structure G. our G structure here, we call it the ribosome, right? So the function of this ribosome is to produce the proteins for the cell, right? Okay, let's move on to our H-labeled structure. We call this structure the Golgi apparatus. It makes final changes to the proteins made by the ribosomes on the endoplasmic reticulum and send the protein to where they are needed, right? Okay, let's move on to our structure L, which we call it the lysome, right? So the lysome contains the enzymes that digest food molecules. It also digests the old organelles, right? And it also digests the disease-causing organisms such as the bacteria, the viruses, right? So it helps to keep this cell healthy, right? Okay, now we're done with animal cell. Let's move on to the plant cell structure. Hope you can see this. This is our plant cell structure, right? Okay, so our plant cell, every organelle that is found in the animal cell, it is found here in the plant cell, right? So, but then there are few organelles that are present here, but then they are not present on the animal cell. Now, let's identify these organelles. We have this black structure here. This black structure, we call it the cell wall. The cell wall provides strength and support to the cell. It helps to keep its shape, right? It also controls substances which enters into and out of the cell, right? Also, the plant cell have this K-labeled structure. We call it the chloroplast, right? This is the site for photosynthesis, right? During photosynthesis, the chlorophyll pigment absorb energy from the sunlight. The chloroplast use this energy to turn carbon dioxide and water into glucose and oxygen, right? So this is very important for plants, right? For photosynthesis. Okay, so the rest, the A structure, which is our vacuole, the mitochondrion, the cell membrane, all these structures, they are there on the animal cell, and we talked about them. We talked about their functions, right? So their functions are the same, right? Okay, now let's look onto the differences between these two cells, right? First, let's look at the shape of this plant cell. The plant cell here, you can look at it like you can tell, oh, this is a rectangle, right? It has a rectangular structure, right? It has a regular shape, right? So when we compare it to the animal cell doesn't have the regular shape. The shape of the animal cell is irregular, right? You can see the difference here. Another difference is that these plant cells have this cell wall, the black structure here labeled J. We call it the cell wall, right? It is absent in the animal cell. The animal cell only have the cell membrane, right? So the plant cell have the cell wall, the animal cell doesn't have the cell wall, right? Okay, let's move on to the chloroplast. Chloroplast is present only in the plant cell because they photosynthesize, right? Structure here. The vacuole in plant cell is large. As you can compare it to this one is too small, right? So the vacuole in plant cell is large and the vacuole in animal cell is small. These are the differences, right? We are done for today's lesson. Thank you.